rights. Maroon, the status of the Maroons, that's what we're talking about today. And I'm very pleased to welcome as my first guest today the leader of the Akampong Maroons, Colonel Chief Richard Curry. Chief Curry, welcome to the program.
Former Prime Minister Golding, thank you for having me, sir. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm glad we were able to get you. Now, you have been much in the news recently. The issues regarding the status and the rights of the Maroons, those are not new issues. They've been around for a long time. But since your elevation as colonel, you have been pursuing those issues with renewed vigor. What precisely are you insisting on, and what's the approach that you see towards bringing the matter to some sort of satisfactory conclusion?
Thank you for that question, sir. All right, well, let me start by saying, former Prime Minister Golding, that I know you're a very diplomatic individual, right? And the way you've carried yourself through politics, and I would also gather through life, has been maintaining, a balanced approach and, giving yourself the respect of information and time to process and make accurate decisions. Now, I've been asking for just that diplomacy, because what has been missing and lacking for all this time in Maroon history is diplomacy. It's almost as if the Maroons were just a memorabilia, and there's so much more context behind that. Why? Because the Constitution, which I heard you mention earlier, doesn't make any mention of Maroons. However, there's a clause that is inserted in the Constitution, Clause 4, which speaks to previous engagements and obligations, which would have been obligations of the British, which would have now passed to the government of Jamaica. That's, to us, is saying this treaty and this document that we have here is still being regarded and should be attended to. So diplomacy is the answer.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I appreciate the way in which you have framed that. Now, one of the things, and I'm not even so much making a suggestion, I'm just seeking to engage the discussion. One of the things that seemed to, the bone of contention seems to be the claim to sovereignty,
Right.
And that has been challenged by lawyers. The position people like Dr. Barnett and Michael Hilton have taken, Professor Bastiani, different from the position that, say, Bert Samuels has taken. But the Prime Minister, in his response to the position you have taken, was quite defiant. The question of sovereignty, it seemed to me, that if we were able to find a way to sandpaper down that particular issue, then we may be able to get some traction on the others. Because if you look at the treaty, for example, where it says, it sets out the leadership succession of the Maroons, starting with Kodjo and then his various brothers. And it goes on to say that after the last brother dead, is the governor that will appoint the chief. That can't be sovereignty. If the treaty itself is giving the white man the power to decide who is to be the leader of the Maroon.
Right. All right, so let me explain that. So I heard you mention a couple of articles in the treaty, which I'd love to go back over, a few of them for you, and provide some clarity and context, which many Jamaicans and historians right through have missed, right? And I'm hoping that with this, it makes it a little bit clearer. So let me go through that clause you're talking, clause 15, right? It says that Captain Kodjo shall during his life be chief in command in Trelawney Town. As you said, it goes on after his decease. His brother Kompong, after his decease, his brother Johnny, and then Kofi, who shall be succeeded by Kwako. And after their demise, the governor or commander-in-chief for the time being shall appoint from time to time who he thinks fit for that command, meaning the command of the militia that would join the British to defend the island in the event that there was an attack. It is a total separate thing from saying they have the right to choose who the chief man is. The chief man is a separate individual and identity from the commander, who is the commander that takes battalion to join the British in force to defend the land.
Yeah, but,
So that's the correct.
yeah, but well, you and I are going to disagree on that because my argument would be that question of commander in chief only applies if the island is engaged in some kind of war. But if it's not engaged in some kind of war, it's the governor, the King's House one, the one who was living in Spanish Town.
Right.
That was the one who was going to appoint the leader of the Maroon. That is not sovereignty.
No, I mean, you do have your right to differ in the opinion, but it's clear in terms of what it is saying. The Maroons were to join the British to defend the island in the event of an attack. We were talking about a time of war. Now, we arrived at this document to facilitate commerce and trade. You said it yourself. The plantations were suffering, the sugar itself was suffering, of which most of the British wealth in that time was depended on.
Colonel, I don't want us to sort of get stuck on this point because there's some other important issues that I'm sure you want to discuss and I want to discuss too. But on this point, if you are correct, then that clause 15 couldn't stop there. It would have to say after the last Kodjo brother dead. This is how the leadership of the Maroons will thereafter be determined. It never say anything like that. It don't say that the Maroons will elect their own leader.
No, but that wasn't a part of what this treaty is about. This treaty is about two separate entities agreeing at cessation of war first, and then two, how they then both operate within this land and defend it in the event of an invasion or some other nation that is rising from within the land. That is exactly what this document is.
All right, discuss with me now. Let us say that we were able to kind of tone down the rhetoric, you know?
Yes.
Get into a sort of civil discussion. Right. Let us say that the government were to decide, look, the Maroons are part of our history. And therefore, you know, there's no point in, after 300 years now, getting into a fight with them. So let us set up a structure, a framework. Let us appoint a team and they're going to sit down with the Maroons and they're going to iron out these issues and see if we can come to some sort of position where everybody would be happy. If that kind of scenario were to emerge, a couple of questions I want to put to you. One, is there unanimity among the various Maroon communities as to what that new relationship with the Jamaican state would look like? That's one. Two, is the question of sovereignty so riveted, so fixed, that is going to prevent any kind of movement on the whole issue of self-governance? Because you see, my thing is that you can have a community in Jamaica that within the framework of our laws and constitution has self-government, you know, has certain rights that are reflected, if not in the constitution, reflected in law. And Parliament could meet next week and pass a law to that effect. But we're going to have to get over this business of sovereignty.
So the question I ask you, former Prime Minister, respectfully, what about the land?
No. I have no difficulty with the land, you know. I have no difficulty with the land.
Let me tell you how
the only question as far as I'm concerned with the land is a couple of things. One, the boundaries of the land. Because if I read the treaty and I understand it, the treaty basically left it up to the Maroons themselves to go work out the boundaries, right? But that too, I believe, is a situation where, you know, reasonable people can sit down, get some surveyors, track out the land, see exactly. And in that respect, Colonel, you will have to also recognize what has been the practice over many, many years, right? So if you find a little piece of land that don't really fit into the 1,500 acres, but then that is land that have been an integral part of the Maroon community, don't quarrel over that, man. Just straighten that out, right? So I don't have a difficulty with that. The only concern I have about the land is, and I'd love you to talk to me on it, how do you reconcile it with the laws relating to titling and so on? For example, the land belonged to the Maroons, But is that collectively or is that individually? In other words, you are a Maroon. Do you have your own piece of land in the community? Or is it community land that you occupy? I don't know.
All right. Let me help you now. All right. So quite a few things you touched on there, sir. So I hope I can retract, I can go back to and answer each properly.
Yeah, now, sure.
First and foremost, let's start out with the land. The land is owned communally. You occupy, you live on the land that it would have essentially been passed down to your family line. You occupy that space until you so desire not to anymore, or any of your successors choose not to occupy anymore. It reverts to the state. So essentially, Maroon land is communally owned, right? Now, when you talk about the territory, it says that they shall, this is thirdly of the treaty, that they shall enjoy and possess for themselves and posterity forever all the land situate and lying between Trelawney Town and the cockpits, this cockpit country, to the amount of 1,500 acres bearing northwest from the said Trelawney Town. So we can agree that the 1,500 acres is not in Trelawney Town. It says bearing northwest from said Trelawney Town. So the arguments of Maroons controlling 1,500 acres is totally debunked if you actually take time to read what this document here is saying.
But it says 1,500, Colonel man.
No, listen, hold on.
It says 1,500.
No, you're correct. It says 1,500, but let me read it again. If we know what Trelawney Town looked like, not Trelawney the parish, Trelawney Town was a precinct itself, right, which included a compound, Flagstaff, Land of Look Behind, all of those districts would have been part of Trelawney Town. Now, Trelawney Town was within cockpit country, right? So when it says they live on lands situate and lying between Trelawney Town, you're talking one parcel of land here, and the cockpits, second parcel of land here, to the amount which means including 1,500 acres bearing northwest from the said Trelawney Town.
You're going to have a difficulty there because your idea of what was given seemed to be very elastic. My idea of it is that it was very specific. If I say I'm going to sell you 100 acres of land between Half a Tree and Crossroads, you can't go capture the whole of Half a Tree to Crossroads. We have to agree. We have to agree. Which part between Half a Tree and Crossroads is the 100 acres that you are to get?
Okay.
So we get on the ground, and you may say, well, you know, I've been occupying this piece of Half a Tree to Crossroads for 100 years, so this must be in it. So we say, all right, this must be in it. Make us see how the 100 will line up. You know? Follow me.
With all
right.
We've gone a length at that discussion, and I mean, you know, we're pretty certain and with, you know, concrete evidence of what this document is portraying exactly is outlining the domicile of the Maroons.
My suggestion to you, and I'm being presumptuous, because you know more about the Maroon history than I will ever live to learn. But my suggestion to you, presumptuous as it is,
yes,
you can't ride the horse two ways, right? If you are holding up the treaty and say, listen, this is what the treaty say. It says we shall have control in posterity. It says this is what we shall do. This is the rights that the treaty give us. And then when the treaty said 1,500 acres, they said, no, is that really 1,500? You know, it's enough more than that. You're going to run into some trouble.
But is that running into trouble, sir, for articulating the document that my ancestors have handed down to us? Is that correct to judge me for being able to identify and interpret a document that my ancestors have left? This document is very clear. I mean, the problem is that we've encountered in the last year in Jamaica particularly is the level of, I don't want to make it seem as if I'm being disrespectful, but I'm being frank, is that the competence as it relates to international law and treaty law is not really there. And then we have many persons who have had their input. They haven't taken time out to understand other interpretations and readings. We have documents, right, to support this thing, to make us not sound crazy. But people still come off making us seem like we're crazy and we're talking something that doesn't exist.
How do you...
The fact is, let me tell you, in 1962, what has happened when Jamaica approached the Queen for independence, a big void was left in that the Maroons weren't informed, the Maroons weren't contacted. And that was evident in findings that we've come across in direct mails and letters from members of parliament in the House of Commons, asking of Bustamante in his arrival, what is the position of the Maroons now and what is their status likely to be after? He went on further after Bustamante left in another writing to say, did not the good man hear my questions? I will make a note. The fact is we do not want to challenge the Maroons on this situation to have them go back to the Queen over something that could be amicably resolved. Now, Jamaica is at a point where
did those members of the British House of Commons,
yes,
did they raise those considerations in 1944 when a new constitution was delivered? Did they raise it with Lord Moyne, who came here to lay the groundwork for that new constitution, or was it only raised in 62? I remember, the leader who presided over the negotiations for the constitution wasn't Buster, it was Norman Manley.
Right. The questions were directed at Bustamante, though, you know. I'm saying that what we have found is that there was some amount of contact and discussion that ought to have taken place then that didn't. It was important enough for it to be put on the file, right, that this was an objection and that is to be noted because it would be source for future contention. Where are we today? We are in a serious contention because, again, we're at a point of Jamaica moving to a republic status, which is great. We are for that. But what does it then mean? Because up until this date, there has been no attention paid respectfully to this document and what it stands for. We've had the British High Commissioner come here 2 times, back to back.
How do we
reaffirm that this document still stands? So how do we move forward?
How do we
yes.
How do we reconcile the sovereignty claim with the authority of the government? For example,
Okay.
let us say a man down in Magati kill another man and him run into Maroon into a compound to go hide out. Can the police enter a compound to apprehend that man, or have to get permission? Or they have to get permission?
Let me read this for you. Ninthly, that if any Negro shall hereafter run away from their matters or owners and shall fall into Captain Cudjoe's hands, they shall immediately be sent back to the chief magistrate. You notice it didn't say plantation. These were criminals. Chief magistrate or the next parish where they were taken.
Answer my question.
So let me say this to you.
Because I'm not talking about a slave that run away. I'm talking about a man who has committed a crime.
Hold on. He's a fugitive. So, of course, just like in international arrangements and diplomatic engagements where countries and nations have extradition clauses and extradition treaties, this is no different from what that is. So if there's a criminal that comes into the state or into the state of a compound and we find that person to be culpable and is a wanted person, then by all means.
So you have to find the person culpable.
No, if it is
I'm saying. So what you're saying is What you're saying
is wanted for a crime, right? If he's wanted for a crime, right? Then he has to. If he's here and hiding out, we cannot provide safety for criminals. We cannot stand for lawlessness. That's not what we're built on.
What would happen
in the island?
So what would happen?
What would happen is we would make contact with the police if there's a warrant out for that person. I'm asking. I want a specific answer from you, Colonel. Because I mean, go ahead.
You're sharp.
Go ahead.
When the police vehicles head into a compound because them have information that the man is in there, what happens when they get to the perimeter of a compound? Are you saying that they have no right to come in there to go hunt down the man? They must wait for you to hand him over, or they must apply for extradition?
I did not say that. What I'm saying is, as in the past, where there was an engagement and agreement in place as to how you handle these matters. Right now, we informally have one in place where if there is a criminal here, we would expect, as it has been in the past, that the police or the head of the division would make contact with the chief man or the colonel, right, at that time to say, look, there's a man in your community, he's wanted for crimes, and we are coming to get him, or we want you to hand him over. It was either or either. That was something that was done in past. It is not something new. We don't have a formal agreement now, but you can go and ask the police. I've been working directly with law enforcement from the Magati and Silo divisions in ensuring that there's proper accordance with laws within the territory and expanding geographic.
And what you're saying is that that protocol must be formalized.
Of course, nothing strange there.
Tell me now. I mean, do the Maroons collect taxes from their people?
No, we don't. Right?
So tell me now, if you're a sovereign state and you preserve all of those rights, what relationship would you have with the budget that the government passes in, God knows, every April?
All right. Look at it this way. All right. Since the claim is that the Jamaican, what we're saying is that Maroons are Jamaican, right? We have Jamaican instruments, passports, IDs, and Maroons vote in the elections. But when we turn and look in the communities, the Maroon communities, not just a compound, look at all the Maroon communities. What is really being done, right? We're being used and propped up for votes for political reasons. We have no water in our community, former Prime Minister. We provide 40% of Jamaica's fresh water. We have no running water, and we're praised and highlighted every year.
Fine. And I'm not... I want to pin it down. Because I see where your mind is. For example,
yes.
We get a lot of aid from America, no?
Yes.
And from England.
Yes.
To help with our schools or to help with our hospitals. So in a sense, what you're saying is that the sovereign compound, what would be expected, the Jamaica government, same way like how America gives Jamaica aid. We're a sovereign country, they're a sovereign country. That the Jamaican government would provide aid. Not an entitlement, because we can't compel America to give us nothing. But we say to them, boy, we need help, and they help us. Is that the position that you're putting a compound in? Where
yes.
It's not an entitlement.
Yes.
But it's an expectation.
Listen, I humbly submit that forever what we've been looking for is understanding what this relationship is on paper, because it doesn't exist. The fact is, we have been operating in a very grey space, which has caused a lot of contention and problems. The situation with the police last year, one example. Police really don't know how to operate when they come into the space or interact with the colonel and his administration. Now, it's a similar thing in the U.S., as you mentioned earlier, where the U.S. government has certain recognition of tribal nations and their rights and privileges and their lands. I want you to do a little research for me. I know you like to do researches as well. There's a document called Concurrent Resolution 331, right, which relates to how the Indian rights were brought into constitutional effect in the United States, which galvanized the relationship that is there today. Now, is it perfect? No, it might not be perfect. But guess what? There are nations of people out there living in their autonomous regions and realizing in their true potential, their tribal realities as indigenous and First Nation peoples. Now, you said Kinda, which is Hebrew Ashanti, or one family. This is the recognition that there's a separateness on the island, but together we are one family. Now, without the recognition of that separateness, Honorable Prime Minister, there cannot be unity amongst the people. Out of many, one people.
Tell me, I'm sure you're familiar with the arrangements involving the Kalinagos in Dominica.
Yes, very much.
Would that be a kind of template for the Maroons in Jamaica, or that would not be appropriate?
Well, I think what needs to happen, to be honest, as I said, is dialogue, because there's no template that is perfect. It will all boil down to circumstances, because we have very peculiar circumstances, sir, which it relates to the development of our state and the people who are here who are really suffering and need help. Now, on top of that, the wider Jamaica needs assistance from an economic standpoint, a commercial standpoint, that we have potential capabilities and resources that could help be an enabler or a facilitator to such development. We do not want to challenge the government. We do not want to overthrow the government. That is not our assertion. I want to remind every well-thinking Jamaican, the arguments are sore, but the intentions are pure. Believe me, what we are talking for is legacy business. A lot of people don't understand this culture, this history, and this document.
Colonel, I'm in trouble because I'm out of time, but there's one question I have to get in before we go.
Sure.
Do you perceive that each of the Maroon communities, is it 4 or 5 we have? The numbers keep jumping around.
All right. So there's Flagstaff, which is
whatever.
Right.
Would each of them be separately sovereign, or would there be one sovereign Maroon state that incorporates all of them?
Listen, let's forget the word sovereign for now. All right, that is a sore contention for everybody. Let's talk about the inclusion of the Maroon communities in the state welfare. We are elected to lead in our respective districts and territories.
I'm out of time. It's 12 o'clock. I'm out of time. Sorry. We're going to have to run. We might be able to come back to this some other time. We'll be in touch with you. Thank you so very much.
Please. Thank you.
That's Colonel Richard Curry, the leader of the Akampang Maroon. That's what we're talking about today. Maroon status, Maroon relationships, the constitutionality, all of the issues when we come back after the break.